And welcome back to Janky AF. Just a little quick announcement here as we celebrate 100 episodes of Year of the Aerostar. Janky do thank you to everyone, and especially to Glenn from Dr. Evil's Laser Creations. And I'll put a link up on the screen and into the description. He sent me this absolutely wonderful wooden piece of art. He does these wonderful creations, and he sent me one in the mail, and it was very, very nice and a perfect little way to sort of celebrate 100 episodes. So I wanted to give a shout out to him, and I'll do a separate video on me actually putting this great thing together. So Janky do thank you to you. Go check him out and get one of these awesome little Aerostars for yourself. The only other thing I wanted to say was that this episode is very long. I got really into it. Teaser or spoiler alert, I recorded this episode on 2 different continents. But don't worry, I was very regular the whole time, and that's a little bit of a poop joke there for you. So, hope everyone enjoys this episode. Sorry for the delay, it's just been kind of crazy, hopping around everywhere, but I'm very excited for everyone to watch it, and I think it's a really good one, despite the many janky parts of it, but I guess that's what everyone's come to love and expect. So, Janky do thank you.
And welcome back to Janky AF and Year of the Aerostar, episode number 100. Yes, all the kids are cheering, and for good reason, because today we have another absolutely stunning Ford Aerostar, 100 episodes. It's 5 in the morning. I'm flying across the country today, and I'm trying to squeeze this episode in so as not to miss my flight, but I wanted to record it while I was still in the good old US of A to get it out in time. So many exciting things coming on JKAF, but more on that later. Let's get into this fantastic Aerostar. Here we have a 1997 Ford Aerostar XLT, sold for $7,250 in Pleasanton, California. Now, I told you I was going to throw a little bit of a curveball. This might be like the final episode of Seinfeld, although this is not the final episode of Year of the Aerostar. Where some people kind of like it, some people kind of don't. This is, I think, still a really good Aerostar to feature anyways, because it is sort of like a cream puff. 48K mile Ford Aerostar. You can see this lovely shade of red. Extended length, running boards, XLT, yada, yada, yada. However, the reason I wanted to feature this Aerostar is because this Aerostar is featured on Bring a Trailer, the famous car auction website that probably most of you know about. This, to me, represents a huge milestone in the Ford Aerostar as a classic vehicle, and that's why I wanted to do this episode for 100, because I wanted to be the first one to sell an Aerostar and Bring a Trailer. Now, a few years back, I had my second 1986 Ford Aerostar manual transmission. I decided I just couldn't hang on to it, which is crazy now. But even back then, I was thinking, well, it's the same model year. Maybe if I want one of, every model year. It's a duplicate. It needed a lot of work. I bought it dirt cheap. And I had taken the rear bumper off of it to put on my brown 1986 Aerostar, and I sold it to my good buddy Evan for what I paid for it, which was $500. So it had low mileage. It was pretty clean, although it had a lot of little jankies going on. It certainly was not an original, because it was a passenger van, but the interior had all been torn out. There had been a panel welded in. It had been repainted in kind of not great job, but it was super low mileage. As I recall, unless the odometer turned over, it was like 50,000 miles, and it was pretty clean underneath. It had the carbureted V6, the 2.8 liter, but again, and I still don't regret it, which is the weird thing, because honestly, it would have been really, really cool to have. However, Evan did a wonderful job with it, and we shot some footage a while ago of the two of us. Hopefully that'll come out sometime, whenever Janky AF has a little bit of time, which is never. But I got the bumper out of it, which now looking at it, to try to find a bumper is so rare. That was probably, like, I still probably made money on the deal, even though I broke even on it. I got the free bumper, yada, yada, yada. But at that time, I was thinking about seeing if I could list that as a 86 Ford Aerostar 5-speed project, because a lot of people don't know that Ford Aerostars came with a manual transmission. And I think some people would have been, it would have kind of caught their eyes, one of those quirky oddball cars on Bring a Trailer. And, like, who knows, maybe I could have made $1,000 on it and profited 500. But then that probably would have required me to keep the rear bumper on. And I really wanted to make my brown Aerostar complete. And now the nice thing is I sold it to a friend, so I get to see it all the time still. So it's like it's kind of still in the family. So I'm kind of glad in hindsight that I didn't sell that one on Bring a Trailer. Now, an Aerostar has been sold on Cars and Bids, Doug DeMuro's website. He has famously never reviewed a Ford Aerostar, although he tried to review that one. And he's even talked about this in a video, which maybe I can dig up. But I think, no offense whatsoever to Doug, I think Bring a Trailer was kind of like the OG car auction website. At least, I'm sure there was ones before that, and you get into all the Mecum and Barrett Jackson, all these auctions. Bring a Trailer is not the first car auction website. However, I think it has a pretty strong foothold as like the internet-based car auction website. So to me, Bring a Trailer was always sort of the gold standard. Now, Cars and Bids is very cool as well, and I actually might think about trying to sell a car on Cars and Bids before, just because if it's something of that sort of 80s and 90s generation, you have a little bit more of a narrowly defined audience, which could be good. All that being said, Bring a Trailer, to see it after getting their daily email and seeing so many vehicles on Bring a Trailer over the years. I think they've sold over 100,000 vehicles now. To see a Ford Aerostar on there is so cool. And so I wanted to sort of highlight that. I thought for the 100th episode of Year of the Aerostar, it would be a perfect one, because, we always talk about how the Aerostar is this underrated classic. And this kind of like solidifies that, because it's on the website, so they've accepted it as like, it's qualified to make the cut, so to speak, because you do have to get approved to sell vehicles on Bring a Trailer. It's a very, very nice example. Let's not forget that. So it's sort of worth it to be here on its own. In particular, you get to see, now my phone's ringing. Hold on. It just doesn't want me to fucking record this episode. Did I say fly across the country? I meant fly across the ocean. Here I am at the Thames River in London. You can see behind me Big Ben and this giant Ferris wheel, as well as a lovely tree. And of course, the Thames River in 1858 was the site and smell of the Great Stink of London, wherein the entire river was filled with raw sewage, and the fellas down there at Parliament had to do something about it, so they hired Joseph Bazalgette. You can look that up, great little history lesson for you. But anyway, so far I've been walking around London all day, and I have not seen a Ford Aerostar. And welcome back to Janky AF again. Well, I have a red shirt on, and I have a Ford hat on, so we're keeping some sort of continuity, but everything else is, all bets are off. First, my alarm went off and I was trying to squeeze out that episode, so that turned off my phone. Then I had to get up and go, fly across the ocean. I spent a day and a half in London, didn't sleep at all, and then drove to took another train to Bristol, England, and then drove, my first time ever driving right-hand drive, steering wheel on the wrong side of the car on the wrong side of the road, 3 hours to Tenby, and now I am in a hotel room in Tenby, but I really want to get this, which is in Wales, but I really want to get this 100th episode out.
So in a way, this is a multi-continent recording of Year of the Aerostar, and forgive me if I repeat myself here, but here we are back with this 48,000 mile 1997 Ford Aerostar XLT. And I had some time to process this while I was thinking about how I wanted to, continue on with this episode. And I really do think this is a great choice for the 100th episode, because we can do a lot of things that we've been talking about on Year of the Aerostar. We can take these sort of theories that we have on the Aerostar and we can put them to the test to see how they actually stack up. And this listing has 53 comments, and I intend to read every single one of them. So this will be a longer episode, but it's a celebratory episode. Also, we have, the last Aerostar we looked at in 99, absolute cream puff, but that was, the asking price on that was $14,000, over $14,000. I don't even, this is no reserve auction, but this sold for $7,250, so about half that price. It actually has comparable miles on it. I believe that other one was 54,000. It's also a 97, also rear-wheel drive, also an XLT. Now, you could argue that the paint scheme on that was a little more special, but certainly the red paint scheme, especially with this three-dimensional little bumper trim line, it does have the running boards, it has the factory alloy wheels. It's in very similar aesthetic condition, exterior and interior, so you could argue that they're very, very comparable vehicles, and at best, you would have to argue the only thing that's greater on the other one is the paint job, but is that really a $7,000, premium for that van? Most would argue probably no, although it was a really beautiful van. I mean, the running boards were a little nicer. I like the Aerostar in red quite a bit. However, I do wish it was more of a fire engine red. This is a gripe I make often on this program. Nonetheless, it's a very striking vehicle and it looks very, very nice. So this sold for $7,250. So this, is a benchmark. It's the first time an Aerostar has been on Bring a Trailer. There was one on Cars and Bids, like I already mentioned, but Bring a Trailer to me sort of is the benchmark for valuation on what a classic car will do price-wise. And, $7,200, and we'll see as some of the commenters say, I think it's a stunning value, really. What can you get for $7,000? You can't even get like it's hard to get anything decent for $7,000. And then you dip into like the classic car market for a vehicle that's, you could buy an old like Porsche 944 for $7,000, but you're probably gonna have to put $5,000 or $6,000 into it. This thing is turnkey. It's ready to go. It's less than 50,000 miles. So let's just read the whole thing for you. You're welcome to go check out this listing. It's evergreen. It'll always be here because it was already sold. But this 1997 Ford Aerostar XLT remained with its first owner in California until it was acquired by the selling dealer in 2023. And it now shows 48,000 miles. The van is powered by a 4-liter V6 mated to a 5-speed automatic transmission and is finished in red and gray over gray cloth upholstery. I like this because also, normally we're doing a critique of like Facebook Marketplace, and Bring a Trailer has its own critique we can do. Obviously it's an auction website, so they're trying to sell the vehicle. And I like when they do this with houses too. They have this very flowery language and also yet very official. Like there's a certain language to real estate and there's a certain language to selling vehicles where everything's laid out sort of very plainly, but normally like on a Rolls Royce, you could be like, oh, it's like finished in, a cream, a Connolly leather or something like this. And this is, or they'll have fancy names for the colors. This is just finished in red and gray over gray cloth upholstery. But it still sounds fancy somehow, just because of the way they word it. Equipment includes a rear window wiper, sliding side windows, a feature that I do talk about quite often, aftermarket running boards. So these are aftermarket, that's confirmation. I've often talked about whether these running boards are factory or not. Cruise control, front and rear climate control, and a factory cassette stereo. It never sounded so fancy. Maintenance performed in preparation for the sale is set, and this is, people always gripe about this in the comments, like the legalese of Bring a Trailer, because they never want to be held accountable for anything. Like they never want to be sued for misrepresentation, even though they're just a broker anyways, you know. But that's why they always say is said to have. You know, they'll never confirm it directly. It's always like, well, you know, this is what the seller is claiming. And in fairness, they never see the vehicle. You know, the seller sends them the pictures, they put the listing out, and they're just a broker. They just connect the seller and the buyer. So from their standpoint, it actually makes sense to not claim anything absolutely, because, you know, then they would be liable for that. So anyways, performed in preparation for the sale is said to have included replacing the air filter, spark plugs, and accessory belts along with the dampers, which I think is actually quite important on the Aerostar. This Aerostar is now offered at no reserve with an accident-free Carfax report and a clean California title. Oh, so here we go. We do have the color of it. The van left the factory finished in Torador red metallic and features contrasting lower body panels. The seller dealer notes that the roof and the bumper covers have been repainted. Good idea to repaint the roof because the sun really beats on those, especially in a California car. And the bumpers have been repainted. That's pretty cool. Equipment includes a rear window wiper, aftermarket. Okay, they told us that already. Bright 14-inch wheels. Is that the beginning of the sentence? I guess it is. Bright 14-inch wheels are wrapped in two 1575 Hankook Optimo tires, and a compact spare is mounted beneath the van. Terrible place for a spare tire, but in California, I guess not. Okay, the dampers were replaced in preparation for the sale. The front bucket seats and second and third row bench seats. I believe this actually has captain's chairs, but we'll get to that. Maybe it does have benches all around. Maybe I'm just thinking of episode 99. Are upholstered in gray cloth with patterned inserts. So then I always call them two-tone seats. They're patterned inserts. That's the official word for them. Amenities include cruise control, a center console, front and rear climate control, that is an amenity, and a factory AM/FM cassette stereo. An AM radio, as we know now, is an amenity because Ford has taken them out of cars. The cargo area features side and floor storage compartments, and third row bench is removable. Wow, the second row isn't? A stain is visible on the right front seat, and photos show a crack in the rear stereo volume control. I like how thorough they are, I gotta say that though. The multifunction steering wheel wears an aftermarket cover, and it frames a 90-mile-per-hour speedometer, ooh la la, and supplementary gauges. The digital odometer indicates 48K miles. Oh, it's a digital odometer. That's interesting because I thought they were all analog on the second gen interior. The facelifted interior, I should say. Discoloration on the steering wheel is visible in the gallery below. Okay, so it does have the 4-liter. Now, thank you to Chris Mert, who answered my question, because he did have a 97, and his does have a 97, and the 3-liter engine is in that. So the 3-liter was offered 97. I didn't know if it was only the 4-liter. 152 horsepower. This really is funny how anemic 152 horsepower sounds these days. But you got to remember the original Aerostar in '86 that came with the 4-cylinder, which I have, makes only 100 horsepower, or like 105 depending on who you ask. So, you know, you're getting a 50% bump there. 225 pound-feet of torque. Now that's you know, respectable. Okay, talks more about the maintenance. You can see the underbody on this thing. It's California. Obviously, it's going to be in like pretty pristine condition. Power sent to the rear wheels through a 5-speed automatic. Okay, again, the 5-speed only offered in 1997. And that was like sort of a big deal because it was the first 5-speed automatic transmission offered in any minivan. This is pretty funny. The Carfax report shows no accidents or other damage and lists history in California. So only in California. The van was designated a gross polluter by the state of California in October 2007, and it most recently passed the California emissions test in October 2021, which is hilarious because, you know, this is very California. I pick on California a little bit. I guess everyone does, so I guess maybe I should give them a break. But it was designated a gross polluter in 2007, but then in 2021 it passed an emissions test. So, you know, figure that one out. Okay, photo gallery. And we do have some, you know, we do have some driving videos. Perhaps we'll watch one of those. See if they talk about it. 651.
Hello, on YouTube. My name is Bernard, and welcome to the Car Finder Garage. This is a test drive video of the 97 Ford Aerostar van. Just put some fuel in it.
Okay, so this is a sort of a guy who sells cars, obviously. It's at the gas station.
So, I don't know if any of you guys watched the video prior, which was the walk around a couple days ago. The airbag light did turn on. I told Bring a Trailer, and they were okay with keeping the auction going. I am having it repaired. The part has been ordered. It's just there's power going to the ABS module, but the ABS module is not reading the power, so the circuit is getting repaired and the module, so that'll be repaired for the next owner.
So I actually have a similar issue on my 93 Sport where the airbag light will blink. I've looked into this. I should actually find out exactly what he ordered because maybe I can figure that out myself, but neither here nor there. Okay, so I do like watching the videos on here. It's cool that it has a video. However, I think that, you know, we're just skiing, driving on the road. So I'm not going to play the whole video. If you would like to.
The side panels light blue.
I like that he's talking about the van. That's kind of nice. This is one of the better Bring a Trailer videos I've seen, by the way, where a lot of times it's just a silent, static shot. It's not always framed the best.
No vibration when you drive, nothing. It's just such a great driver.
We're getting a nice description here.
Belonged to a older woman.
Unfortunately,
she can no longer drive. That's why the vehicle was sold.
Oh, we're getting a whole description of everything. Doing a good sales job. Okay, but I encourage you to go watch that on your own, but for now let's look at a couple pictures and then we'll get into the comments because that's where I really think the juiciness and the meat and potatoes is. Again, beautiful front shot. You can see how nice the paintwork is. I guess Bring a Trailer is not going to let me zoom in on a clicked picture. That's a knock against Bring a Trailer. When I try to zoom in, it goes back to the gallery. You know, that's Janky no Thanky for Year of the Aerostar here. So we'll just look at the nice big pictures. Unfortunately, not able to zoom in or out. And there's a ton of them. Again, the face of the Aerostar, just so iconic. You know, I was just watching a documentary on the DeLorean time machine from Back to the Future, and one of the guys who worked on the car talked about the styling in the DeLorean, and he put it in such a cool way where, you know, the car looks very sort of sharp and flat, and yet it angles inward at the top. And I feel like I could overlay a clip or a picture of the Aerostar and just put that audio clip of him in talking about the DeLorean styling, and it would like fit identically. Like you wouldn't even know he was talking about a DeLorean. It's amazing how precise it is. And a few episodes ago, we talked about how cool it would be if the Aerostar had been the time machine instead of the DeLorean. Both vehicles of which, by the way, don't have a speedometer. Although this goes to 90, but that's because it's a later model. In the 80s, all car speedometers went to only 85 miles an hour, I guess, which is hilarious. So they had to put a fake speedometer in the DeLorean to hit, of course, 88 miles an hour for the plot line. This is a nice shot right here. Again, we're getting like sort of a 3/4 front view, a little bit zoomed in, shallow depth of field. And you can just see how shimmering this is. You know, these they are bright 14-inch factory alloy wheels. A very, very nice example. And I like that it's, you know, single tone red with the gray bumpers, just sort of a very classic, iconic Aerostar look. Here we have another profile shot with those running boards. Now I'm going to put a poll up because I want to know if people like the extended or the shorty, as we call it, the regular length Aerostar better. The great 1989 Aerostar recently put up something that said he prefers the standard length, and I gotta say, I think, like, you know, if I had to choose, I think I would pick the standard length as well. I think it just looks, and I've actually heard people say they think it looks too stumpy. There may even be a comment in here saying as much. Let's look at the interior a little bit. Again, patterned inserts, that's what these are on these like lovely two-tone seats, and we do have the pattern insert on your door card too. I had the exact same, except mine was gray or tan. This steering wheel wrap must have been very, very popular, where you have this winding cable that goes all the way on the wheel. It's kind of clunky to me, honestly, and I love a thin steering wheel, and when you take that off, I took it off in my 86 and then cleaned it up and wiped it down. It is a very thin steering wheel. It's very, very nice to operate the steering wheel of the Aerostar. Again, we can see the roof that was repainted. Looks like they did an excellent job. Factory roof rack, and you see these lovely slats on the roof of the Aerostar. Very, very nice touch that you don't get to see that often. And now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, the short versus the long. So I have two standard length Aerostars, so maybe I'm biased, but I think when you see it in profile, you realize how, for a van, in context, how short of a vehicle it is and how compact of a vehicle it is, and yet how much room it has inside it. I really like the styling of the standard length. We call them shorties, but that being said, I really want an extended one too, because I think it's just like, it's the Mac Daddy. Like, it has this presence to it that the standard length doesn't. Also, the fact that you can fit a full 4x8 sheet of plywood in there is really, really cool. And there's one comment that's very, very funny down at the bottom here. I believe this was the first purchase by this Bring a Trailer user. So I'm actually going to work backwards from, or maybe I should go all the way to the bottom. Maybe we'll go to the bottom and read up to the top, because there might be answers to questions. So it makes more sense in that direction. Okay, so of course, Indy Trucks, first bid, $69, ha ha ha. Okay, first user comments, do those rear benches lie flat? Brings back memories, exclamation point. And maybe I'll zoom in these so you can actually read them on screen with me here. I believe only the Eddie Bauer, only the Eddie Bauer versions, the benches turned into a bed. I think that was exclusive to the Eddie Bauer package, which I didn't know until recently. So the answer to that question is probably no. Okay, wow, this is rare. A family down the street growing up had one of these, and it was fugly, which we all know what that stands for, but worked for 4 kids. Again, the Aerostar, for it suffers 2 great tragedies, which is one, that it's kind of forgotten about generally, although I think this really raises the profile of the Aerostar, quite honestly, because so many people look at Bring a Trailer. I won't be surprised if we saw another Aerostar pop up soon on Bring a Trailer. And I also think that it just gets turning in people's minds, and people start reminiscing and realizing that for how sort of unknown this van is now, at one period in time, we forget it was ubiquitous. Like, it was everywhere. Like, a lot of people had these, and it ran for 12 years. So a lot of people had multiple versions of it. Had they got one, drove it for 5 or 6 years, put 100 and some thousand miles on it, and their kids beat it to hell. And so they traded in for another one. I know 2 such families just in my little town that had that experience. So, but a lot of people, the other great tragedy is that a lot of people think that it is really ugly. Like, it's funny how polarizing the styling of this vehicle is. I think people really do love it or hate it. And I guess I shouldn't say that's a tragedy, because a lot of iconic cars, I mean, there's some cars that are just, nobody thinks the Lamborghini Miura is ugly, right? However, I think a lot of great art is very polarizing, and it's a kind of a love it or hate it type situation. And I think the Ford Aerostar really falls into that category, where it is super polarizing. A lot of people think it's like the ugliest thing. A lot of people claim that they were very, very unreliable. And then on the other hand, you see people that are like, oh, I got mine to 300,000 miles. It was a great van. And you see people, like in our community, that just think the styling of it is so iconic and so timeless, and continues to sort of be relevant and be, age even better and better and become a true classic. Okay, does third row seat 2 or 3 persons? I would say you could put 3 in the back. I think the back bench is usually wider because you can fit 7, so that'd be 2, 2, 3. You may even be able to squeeze 3 people into the middle bench, even though it's shorter, but I think you probably wouldn't. You might not have a third seat belt in the middle bench, although you might technically be able to fit 8 people in this car. Okay, this is close to being as impressive as the 2 low mileage Tempos, the great Ford Tempo, that have come across within the last year or so. The last time I saw an Aerostar, it appeared have missed its audition for Breaking Bad. I recall the USPS used extended length Aerostars. Was it? If anyone watches, I've never seen Breaking Bad because I live in a hole and don't watch TV. But maybe they're saying it should have been on Breaking Bad. The last time I saw an Aerostar, it appeared have missed. So even on Bring a Trailer, we have typos. So that's nice. It's still a sight of the people. It's auditioned for Breaking Bad, which is weird because if they're saying the last time they saw it, that would mean it did appear on the show. But the Pontiac Aztec, of course, was the Breaking Bad car, right? Having not seen the show, I just know that show repopularized the Aztec. So, anyways, if you watch Breaking Bad, tell me if there's one in it, please. The USPS extended length Aerostars, the last few years they were produced. Ford must have made them a great deal. Not necessarily, because, the USPS, the Postal Service Aerostars, were a classic. I've seen one in my life, and it was probably just before they, got retired. But, the Aerostar, on one hand, they didn't sell as well as I think Ford thought as cargo vans, but they sold really well as passenger vans. So, but that being said, in 1995, of course, as the story famously goes, they were phasing out the Aerostar, bringing in the Windstar, and the dealerships and factories, as the legend goes, were bombarded. That's the word that used to be on Wikipedia, with letters asking them not to stop making the Aerostar. So I think, they I don't know. I'm not sure that I totally buy that. The only reason USPS bought them was because they were at such a discounted price. I think the demand for Aerostar was always strong. They consistently sold over 100,000 units a year, which in these days is outstanding numbers. Okay, we see more bids coming. What the hell? I need something to haul my poor purchase decisions anyways. Shrug emoji. An added bonus is the ability to dress it up as a Star Trek shuttle for Halloween. And I believe there is one NASA space shuttle that was made out of an Aerostar, which it's surprising there weren't more made because of the advertisements with the NASA shuttle in it. But I think it was a Burning Man Aerostar that was made as a space shuttle, and they did a pretty darn good job with it. It was like super futuristic. Now, it may not have been a NASA, it may have been more of a individual interpretation of a space shuttle. However, yes, that is a good point. It does dress easily as a space shuttle, as it was partially modeled after one. An insanely clean kid taxi of the era, produced right before the SUV craze really hit its stride. I talked about this recently, and it's very true that the Aerostar was sort of at the peak and the end of the peak of the minivans like reign in America, and in my opinion, far superior. I am a bit of a van over SUV sort of. I have a pretty deep bias in favor of vans over SUVs for lots of reasons, which I'll have to get into in another video. But most of you watching will probably know why. It's just they had a smaller footprint, they were a much better use of space, and with the Aerostar you could still get four-wheel drive, and that's why a lot of these people get SUVs, because they want four-wheel drive. They also want to sit up high, but you did sit up pretty high in the Aerostar, especially compared to like modern minivans. This sort of truck van hybrid was really a good idea. And there's also literature, there's this great Haggerty article that I keep referencing and still haven't made a video on, where they say it really almost pioneered the crossover too, because it was this sort of like hybrid vehicle, and it kind of like a do-everything vehicle. And now the crossovers are really big, obviously. We have Ford and Chevy phasing out cars altogether. And being in Europe right now, I must say, there's so many of these like angular vans, and they're kind of like, but they're a little bit like the Mazda 5, if you remember that. It's sort of like a van, sort of like a car. And they actually did sell that in America, and you could get those with a manual transmission. A very underrated sort of European car that actually made it to America, a European style car. But vans are still huge over here, and SUVs are not. I mean, you see plenty of crossovers, but you never see a Chevy Suburban over here. And especially in a tourist town where I live in, even though this is a tourist town as well, but that's Europe. I mean, Jeep Wagoneers, Chevy Suburbans, they're just so massive. And as you'll see, there's one comment up here that I'll get to, but it really paints the picture perfectly of sort of why the minivan, I think, is superior to the SUV. And you have, on these SUVs, these Suburbans, all they do is haul people around. They never go off-road. They get worse gas mileage. It's a much worse use of space. They're heavier. Their tires are bigger, so it means all your suspension components and your tires and your brakes, all that stuff is more expensive. And I just think the van is superior. Anyhow, to this commenter's point, produced right before the SUV craze really hit its stride. If you were born in the 80s, your family had one of these, or a friend's family did. Ubiquitous, I believe, is the term, and I borrowed that from this comment. Thank you, seller, for bringing this here. Definitely takes me back. And this is another crystallization of a point where classic cars, what is considered a classic, and this is one way in which sort of government bureaucracy is actually sort of a shining light, because they define it as anything that's 25 years or older, at least in New York State. If your car is 25 years or older, you can get it insured by Haggerty, and you can get historic plates on it, you can get classic car insurance on it, and you can even get vintage plates on it, which I have a video on, which actually, to toot my own horn here a little bit, has been quite popular. And I think people have enjoyed that video because a lot of people don't know that what vintage plates even are and how they can be applied. And basically, all it is you can buy an old plate off eBay, and as long as it matches the time period in which your car was produced. So for example, I used the Lady Liberty plate, the Statue of Liberty plate that was on like the Ghostbusters car. They made that from 86 to 2000. So any car from 86 to 2000, you could get those plates on. Now 2000 isn't 25 years away yet, but when it is, any car from 86 to 2000, once it's insured and registered as historic, then you can actually, for like $3, it's like a $3 fee. It's like the best deal in bureaucracy anywhere. You can get a vintage plate and you can put it on your car. So your car is actually like period accurate, even down to the license plates, which is really cool, but I digress. So what I was saying is that's kind of actually quite nice that the government doesn't, interject their own taste into things. Whereas when you look at classic car enthusiasts, I think generally they're appreciative of anything, as we see here. But all a classic is, like classic cars, the main thing about them is nostalgia. Because in a lot of ways, they're not better than modern cars, just from a reliability standpoint. Although you could make arguments that, with direct injection, people have said that's like kind of killing engines because of the way the gas is put into the fuel is put into the system. It can burn up engines and create gunk in cylinders and stuff like that. By and large, though, older cars are more unreliable. If for no other reason just than that they have older parts in them and they have old hoses and plastic and wiring and that stuff just eventually fails. So mostly the reason people drive older cars, I think, and Jay Leno says this all the time, it's about the story of the car just as much as it's about the car. Ed Bolian and VinWiki, he likes buying the worst example of great cars because it's about the story and the journey that the car's been through. It's all about the human connection to the machine as much as the machine itself. And I really like this comment because it's, thank you for bringing this here, definitely takes me back. So it doesn't, a lot of people buy a car that their relatives had, like if your my grandmother had a Ford Festiva, and those are actually kind of getting quite popular now too, but I believe it was in that same Cayman green as my 93 Aerostar. And is that a fast car? No. Is it reliable? Maybe. Is it practical? Oh, it's really small. I mean, it's practical for how, it's surprisingly practical for how small it is, but it's not a car you would necessarily want to daily drive. But it's about the story, it's about the connection to the human element that it's just like a song takes you back in time. And I think the car is maybe the only other thing as close that is as close to music in terms of taking you back in time and making you yearn and feel that little slice of time just for a second, like you're going back to another place in time. And for whatever reason, who knows why, as time slips away from us in life, we sort of crave those little moments that we want to hang on to from years ago when relatives that are no longer with us were still here, and things of that nature. So I think that's really great because it really is this crystallization of this point that things that are classic, it removes all subjectivity from the situation, and it actually says like anything that's old, anything that takes you back, anything that makes you relive a memory is a classic. And so for me, that like totally rests my case of the Aerostar being a classic, because as you see in a lot of these comments, it was so ubiquitous, and in one hand that's like a knock against it, like rarity is such a big thing in the classic car world. However, something that was ubiquitous and mass produced and yet now is scarce is almost cooler because the connection to it is almost stronger in a way, because like it's like a legend. Like it had its day, it had its time, it had its heyday, and now the fact that it's in a bygone era makes seeing one almost even more special because the connection to the past is almost stronger in a way. I'm talking in circles here, but I think you catch my drift. Okay, I would love to see all the quirks and features of this Aerostar. Obvious reference to Big Daddy Doug DeMuro. I have an email exchange, I've talked about this, with Doug DeMuro, saying that he wanted to review my 1986 Aerostar when he was living in Philadelphia. it never happened, and then he moved to California, and then he sold an Aerostar on Cars and Bids, wanted to review that. He even talked about it in one of his videos, but wasn't able to. So I hope to be the first person to, I'm probably only person because he's not going to do multiple reviews, but I hope that one day I could drive my Aerostar out to California and have him review it. We'll see. Someone will probably beat me to the punch, but you know, I think I was the first person to contact him about an Aerostar anyway, so I have that. What a weird day. After just seeing the Kawasaki KE175 auction and commenting that my mom had one of those when I was a kid, I scroll down and see this. Well, my mom drove one of these when I was a kid, a blue and silver 86 model, if I recall correctly. We affectionately dubbed it the Anteater due to its unique profile. That's another thing. The Dustbuster, those Pontiac Transports, and what were the Chevy Lumina van and the Oldsmobile Silhouette, those were called the Dustbuster. And you could also make a claim that the Aerostar should have been called that, you know, probably 7 or 8 years before those came out, because that was like, you know, the first real wedgie minivan, at least in America. But Anteater, also a very good nickname, and perhaps a little bit more accurate due to its unique profile. The thing I remember most about it was we had to replace the transmission 4 times in that thing. What a ride down memory lane BAT is for me today. I wonder if it was the automatic or manual transmission. I'm guessing it was the automatic because, yeah, there's something about that big floor-mounted shifter that just seems like it would break eventually. However, the manual transmission, I feel like even though, you know, I did replace mine once already, I feel like probably a little bit more reliable. Here we go. This username is just Excursion, which is hilarious. I hate to say this, but this thing has more room in it than my Excursion! Exclamation point. There you go. I mean, the biggest, and this is true, it's by size the largest mass-produced SUV ever made is the Ford Excursion from the factory. And this user is saying that he thinks it has more room in it than his Excursion, which is probably pretty close. I mean, the roofline, you probably have a little bit more vertical height. You probably have pretty commensurate horizontal width, and length is probably pretty similar too. So again, there you go, the biggest SUV ever made, and this person who owns one is obviously a fan of them, an enthusiast, is saying the Aerostar has more room in it. So, you know, there you go, like, case closed. And it's far less big than all these modern SUVs when you really look at them. So just the practicality thing of this thing is just bursting at the seams. And overall, I will say these comments are overwhelmingly positive, which I really, really like. And I think this is why I wanted to do this sort of longer format episode, because we're now seeing, we know in our little bubble that we love the Aerostar, but it's nice to see the public weigh in on it on a public forum and on a very well-known, well-respected auction site, because we're getting sort of a state of where the Aerostar is within the classic car world. And I think this will give sort of a mass viewing of, you know, the celebration and public appeal of the Aerostar. So I think it's a really positive thing. Okay, Dad had a green one. Nearly certain I remember it being a manual. Is that possible? Now, I wanted to log in and respond to as many of these comments as I could, just as an Aerostar enthusiast, and I will maybe try to do that, but I'm not logged in right now, and so we'll just read the comments. So yes, Adam Y, it is very possible because they did make the Aerostar with a manual transmission. That is accurate. Okay, wow, this is a clean Aerostar. We had 2 of these from the late 80s into the 90s when I was a kid. Dad liked power of the 4-liter and the rear-wheel drive. We liked the 2nd row captain's chairs and the 3rd row bench seat, which folded into a little bed. Now, is that possible? I guess maybe the 3rd row? Because I know in the Eddie Bauers, the 3rd and 2nd row would fold into a big bed, but maybe the rear bench folded all the way down into a mini bed? I don't know. That's a good question. Because if you have captain's chairs and a bed, then that's like, you know, la-ti-da. I believe this 2nd row bench folds like that as well. I believe maybe not, but the jury's still out on that. The extended length is the one to have. In my opinion, the standard length versions looked oddly stumpy and obviously lack the cargo capacity behind the 3rd row. That's true. That is the nicest thing about the long one, is you can fit all those people and still have a ton of stuff. We're driving right now a Volkswagen Transporter from, I think, a 2019 Transporter, and that's actually kind of an interesting comp to the Aerostar because it does have a manual transmission, and that thing does have quite a bit of room even behind the 3rd seat. maybe not as much as an extended Aerostar, but if you want to fit both people and stuff, then yes, the long one is the way to go for. However, if you take those seats out, the short one still has a ton of room in it. So good luck with the auction. Great looking old van. So there we go. Thank you, Tom S. People use these up and threw them away. It's nice to see a clean example. That goes back to my sort of Jerry Seinfeld, Norm Macdonald, comedians in cars getting coffee. And it's true. These were really used and abused. Rode hard and put away wet. Oh, there's a comment, Adam Y. My mother-in-law owned a stick-shift Aerostar. So there you go. It's been confirmed by this user already. Mr. Mongoose, Anteater, I get it, and it's perfect. How is this possible? 26 years old and plus or minus 1,850 miles per year average for a quote-unquote family van with no stains. Well, according to Bring a Trailer, there was one stain on it. What a well-cared-for interior. This van deserves another 150,000 miles of great service. Could it make a camper conversion? Yes, it could. We've seen those too here on Year of the Aerostar. This should be offered with its own set of custom soccer balls. Thank you very much. Yep, definitely the soccer mom car. When these debuted, I really wanted my parents to get one simply because of the ultra cool personal radio with headphone jack for the rear passengers. Instead, we had a series of boring old Cadillac DeVilles. Now, I think the Cadillac DeVille is a fine vehicle. And spoiler alert here, and I of course left them in the States, but one of the things I did go ahead and do, and thank you, I forget your name, I apologize, who sort of pushed me over the edge to do it, was I bought a pair off eBay of the original Aerostar headphones, and they're very, very cool. It's actually a set of 2 sets of headphones, so I'll do a little video on those. But yeah, they came with their own, and I think the Aerostar was the only model that came with its own headphones. You know, it's like, again, and that's kind of a cool tie into the aeronautical sort of messaging of the Aerostar, because, you know, you go on a plane and they'll give you headphones, and the Aerostar came with its own headphones, and you could plug them into the rear so, you know, the kids could listen on headphones while the parents were driving, which, you know, in terms of a road trip vehicle at the time, you know, now everybody has their little AirPods and you can listen to whatever you want, but at the time that was an amazing thing for, you know, the parents to focus on the driving and the kids to be like, you know, pleasantly distracted in the back. So again, very ahead of its time. Good comment. When I was in construction back in the early 2000s, my uncle had a cargo version. These were tough vans. There you go. And down in the South, I think a lot of people still use Aerostars just because they've been preserved a little bit better as work vans. My buddy lives in Georgia and he still sees these things. There's one that lives on his road. He still sees them going up and down the road and still being used as work vehicles. So thank you for the vote of confidence there, Jeremy, too. All right. A long one here. Wow, what a really nice Aerostar. I have a 97,000 mile 1997 XLT E 4-wheel drive version that I've owned for 7 years and absolutely love. Here we go. We bought it for a cross-country move to haul the cat and items we would need immediately in our new house, and we're planning to sell it once we reach our destination. But it's been so handy for carrying stuff that we kept it. There you go. What an affirmation of the Aerostar. As mentioned above, mine has full-time 4-wheel drive that splits the power 1/3 to the front with the rest going to the rear, with the capability to send 100% of the power front or rear with no driver action. Yeah, that is the electronic 4-wheel drive. I've taken ours on some off-road trails here in the Mojave Desert, and it works fine in sand and packed dirt, although the long rear overhang does limit the off-road capabilities of the van. Again, you could lift it or you could get a standard version, and that would probably solve those issues. There are some issues with Aerostars, and this is good, you know, objective knowledge here, which I had not heard before. One being the center crossmember design with rubber bushings on either end where it attaches to the unibody, photo 234, 237, 238. Engine transmission torque twists the crossmember, eventually causing the passenger side bushing to fail, allowing the crossmember to drop down on the retaining bolt, with the driver's side eventually following. So take note, all you Aerostar owners, and I'm trying to take note myself, because I think, you know, suspension is one thing. As like a novice car person, I tend not to think about the suspension of a vehicle, and those are things that aren't necessarily, I mean, obviously they're mechanical, but it's not like an engine where it's more of like a, again, it's not static, but something that's, you don't think about a lot of times when maintaining a vehicle. At least people like me, I'm like, well, as long as the engine's running good and the transmission, that's like all I care about. But, you know, I probably should address bushings on my car. It'd probably ride better than I ever imagined Aerostars could. Because the rubber bushings are an integral part of the crossmember, which is NLA. I don't know what that stands for. Custom bushings have to be fabricated to fix the problem, which I have done on mine. The bushings on this van appear to be fine. Other issues, they are known for blown head gaskets and cracked cylinder heads. What car isn't known for head gaskets, you know? I guess the Buick 3800. Both of which have occurred with my van. To be fair though, the previous owner of my van didn't maintain the cooling system. There you go. And you see this, you see people that say, oh, mine was, you know, a piece of garbage, and you see people take them up to 300,000 miles. So like any vehicle, you're gonna have some failures, but it seems like, I gotta say, from reading a lot of comments on these and hearing a lot of people talk about these, it seems like overall, just the fact that there are 280, 290, 300,000 miles examples out there, you don't see a lot of cars at all in that mileage range. So I think that through the test of time, the Aerostar has objectively come out as a relatively, reliable vehicle up to high mileage. 97 is the last year for this van. It is the only year that the 5-speed transmission was available. Buy it while you can, as you will probably not find a nicer Aerostar than this one. Probably true, and for $7,000, you know. A useless fact, Ford is still using these exact HVAC controls in the 2023 E-Series cutaway vans. I find that fact very useful because, again, just shows, you know, how the Aerostar is still relevant today. Yes, growing up, our family had a dark blue Adam Y. To the commenter who asked about the manual transmission, had a dark blue-green Aerostar, and our best family friends had a brown one. Theirs was a stick, extended length. Man, a brown extended manual transmission, that is a unbelievable spec. Ours was an automatic short version. Needless to say, I spent a lot of time in Aerostar vans back in those days. We were jealous of the families who upgraded to Winstars, quote unquote. Anyway, I'd love to get my hands on an extended version with E4-wheel drive. Make mine an Eddie Bauer edition. Good luck to the seller on this beautiful example. And that's funny with the air quotes on upgraded, because we'll see in the comments coming up. Okay, sort of an irrelevant. Is this the McFly that grew up in Colorado? What always bothered me on these was the stationary passenger seat. This will be a fun one to watch. Has anybody ever wanted another one? Has anybody that had one ever wanted another one? Well, yes, I want as many as I can get. And as I've said, a lot of families, there's so many serial Aerostar. I've had at least 2 commenters on my videos say that they've had 5 Aerostars at one time. So there's a lot of serial Aerostar ownership out there. Okay, the seller about a video. Do you mean it won't slide forward back or won't recline, or God forbid both, question mark, question mark. Now there's a whole discussion that goes on here about, I think my Aerostar passenger seat slides back and tilts backwards. I don't think that's an issue, but maybe on some of the cargos they were a fixed seat or something like that. But I will have to go back and test that on my Aerostar when I get back. Okay, we were jealous of the quoting. We were jealous of the families who, quote unquote, air quotes, upgraded to Winstars. And with the benefit of hindsight, we know who had the last laugh there. In parentheses, former Freestar owner here, LOL. So that's kind of hilarious because, yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the Aerostar was a much better car than the Windstar. And the fact that it also has the disadvantage of being 10 to 12 years older than the Windstar. And still, you know, I see more Aerostars in the wild. Even now, I see a couple Aerostars a year in the wild, which I think is more than I can say for first generation, you know, those first 3 years. Now, granted, they only made it for 3 years, but they're newer. So you would think you would see more Windstars, but I hardly ever see first-gen Windstars. From my memory, the right front seats does not move forward or back. In most vans, the right front seat does not recline because it would block the slide door opening. The pictures aren't loading for me, but you might not be able to see the right side of the right seat to see if there's a recline handle there. I don't remember it had it or not. I think there's a whole discussion. And I think at least the consensus is it at least reclines. Now, sliding front and back, I honestly don't know, but I think it does. Seller, beautiful van here and certainly brings back some memories. Question, does the front and rear air conditioning work? I think they say it does. I just Googled it and the answer was yes, it reclines. Looking at the photo here, there's a circular knob that allows the recline feature. Another question about air conditioning. Great comment here. Take good care of those bumper covers as they are impossible to find in the aftermarket or in OEM condition. Any covers found in junkyards are old and brittle and also very rare. So again, I really want to start a little cottage industry building those bumpers. We'll see if I ever get there. Yes, the front and rear AC works, and we see the bidding going up here and getting a little bidding war. My wife is pissed, but I told her that I want to drop my 3 kids off to private school in this and relive some memories. She prefers her brand new Grand Wagoneer. Oh well, nostalgia is a bitch. So here we have a direct, comparison between the Aerostar and the Grand Wagoneer. I think you should have bought this Aerostar, user, because, maybe she would have eventually come around once she drove that Aerostar and realized how great it was. Grand Wagoneer also, this sold for $7,000. I think a Grand Wagoneer you probably can't get for less than 70 or 80, and you can probably spec it up to $100,000. So you could literally buy probably 20 Aerostars for the price of that Grand Wagoneer. Parents had a black Eddie Bauer edition. No, I think the Eddie Bauer edition by per capita probably had more black paint jobs on it than did other Aerostars. Because I feel like you saw in the brochure that in some of the brochures they had a black Eddie Bauer edition Aerostar. Incidentally, I've seen a couple of black Aerostars recently, and they are just stunning. Second row captain's chairs and backseat bench that folded for us kids to sleep while Dad drove through the night. Now, there's a memory right there. The seats had forest green trees design stitched into them. Now, that's a foreshadowing of my project that I'm working on. Memories. Might bid on it just to drive the kids around as homage to my pops and a trip down memory lane. It's just stuff like that. That's why you get into classic cars. It's a way to connect with the past and, cherish those people who are no longer around. Nice rig. We affectionately refer to these as Aero Edsels. So that's kind of funny because I think the Edsel notoriously sold very, very poorly. So maybe they're just making a comparison to their perceived ugliness of the vehicle. I actually think Edsels look kind of cool, but maybe that's just my taste. But certainly not an apt comparison when you just consider how people forget how successful of a vehicle the Aerostar was. I mean, how many vehicles out there did the factory try to stop making and then people demanded they keep making it? I mean, Chevy just killed the Impala, just killed the Malibu, 2 very legendary marks of a car. And they're not bringing them back, people aren't writing letters to Chevy saying bring back the Malibu, as great of a car as it is. So that, that's such a unique thing in the automotive world, I think. And, it happened to the Aerostar. So Aero Edsel, all respect to you, commenter, I think is not a, I'm getting very defensive of the Aerostar here. Okay, a much better vehicle than the future Winnie Star. Funny. Love it. We had 2 of these. There you go. One in the late 80s and another in the early 90s, both XLT all-wheel drive. The 92 had captain's chairs, hauled our family of 4 and 2 Greyhounds all over the Midwest. Never got stuck in the snow. Nothing but great memories in the Aerostar. There you go. We could stop right there. But we're going to keep going. I've owned 4 of these. Here we go. Currently own 97 in the same color combo and a blue and silver 94 with a 3-inch lift. LOL. There we go. Best snow vehicles around. My 7 and 5-year-old daughters affectionately refer to them as Vanzilla and Van Wilder. I may have to add a third for the herd. Mine are the all-wheel drive version. I believe by the description this one is rear-wheel drive. Thanks, beautiful van. Thank you, Chip D. Great name, too. Traveled many a mile in one of these, also passed my driver's exam, and I've known a couple people that have taken the driver's test in Aerostars too. What an honor. I also passed my driver's exam in one just like this, long wheelbase and all. You never see them this nice anymore. That is true. Okay, all right, here more including bumper covers, but I guess they got rid of their all-wheel stock. The prices were expensive. Okay, there is more discussion about the seats reclining, and I'm sorry, I'm just not going to get into that conversation right now. It's up for debate, and we'll figure that out. Okay, California smog with flying colors. And there you go. Okay, that's so awesome. I can imagine dropping off 3 kids this day and age to a private school in such an awesome vintage van. Please do that. I personally only drive older vehicles, and my 4-year-old son absolutely loves going for rides in them. So, bought a 1993 one, pre-owned, to use as a tow vehicle for my Isetta. Kept the Aerostar for 7 years, and other than a blown AC hose, only required routine maintenance. For 7 years. Family members always wanted to borrow it to haul stuff. There you go. And I get asked a lot too. I miss it. So as you can see, the mother of a friend in high school had one we affectionately dubbed the Space Shuttle, fitting since we lived in Huntsville, Alabama. If she only knew the debauchery that van was subjected to on prom, homecoming, etc. Yes, yes. Boy, okay. Well, I hope you guys don't mind this long episode, but I'm going to keep going because this is really, we're celebrating 100 episodes here, and, we want to celebrate the Aerostar. And again, I didn't pay these people to make these comments. There's genuine love for the Aerostar, and that's what I want to sort of, to all us little fans out there, like, I think that's why we're so enthusiastic about this van, is because we feel like it's so underappreciated. And this is so nice to see, like, all these people just chiming in on this run-of-the-mill, 90s car that everyone's forgotten about on Bring a Trailer. There's Ford GTs, and there's Bentleys, and there's, McLaren Sennas. There's all this automotive, quote-unquote, royalty on Bring a Trailer. And here we have all these people commenting on the Ford Aerostar. It's just great to see. Growing up in the Midwest, I vividly recall the winter road trips in Florida in our Aerostar. Although this one is only an XLT, the lines are reminiscent of our Eddie Bauer. With room for the entire family, you would be hard-pressed to beat the Aerostar in today's modern standards. Could not have said it better myself. The Ford Aerostar utilized a one-box design similar to the Ford Transit and Renault Espace. In contrast to its European counterparts, the long wheelbase of the Aerostar placed the wheels near the corners, minimizing body overhangs. In an effort to further improve its fuel efficiency and aerodynamics and lower its curb weight, not a terribly heavy car either. I think these are around 3,400 to 3,600 pounds, which in today's standards, really not that bad. And this is, I don't know if I've talked about this much, but I do know this. Multiple plastic body parts from the 1984 concept car were adopted by the production vehicle, including the bumper covers, fuel tank, and rear hatch. Now, unfortunately, I found this out the hard way when I got my brown Aerostar stuck in the mud, and my neighbor / landlord Stan had to push me with his tractor into the garage. I was very frustrated, and he helped me get in the garage, so I'm not mad, but the bucket of the tractor is a little ding in the rear hatch of my 86 Aerostar. But the cool thing is you can see that it's made out of a composite material, which just, again, like, I know F-150s are made out of aluminum now, but back in, 84, when this car was still in, not production, but research and development, still in sort of the genesis of the Aerostar, they put these composite body panels on it, including the rear bumpers, well, that's normal, but fuel tank and rear hatch. So when driving past the Lane Motor Museum in Tennessee, I saw the stewards prepping one, so if you're near Tennessee, for their showcase on modern Americana. So that's cool. They're getting into museums now. It's all sort of really happening. Good luck with the auction. I like the Kumo tires as well. I believe they were Hankooks, but so great comment there. How long can you store the van for? Oh, popcorn in hand. Okay, drove the van yesterday, blah, blah, blah. I put $280,000 on mine, same spec, one of the best vehicles I've ever owned. If this had been on the East Coast, I would have been bidding. Enjoy. Okay, so here we have, this is funny because it's the last comment. Four-wheel drive Dave says, we bought one of these new to tow a small travel trailer. You can see where this is going. When we headed up into the Sierra in the summertime, the exhaust header got so hot, and because, part of the engine is in the cockpit of this vehicle, that I couldn't keep my sandaled foot on the accelerator, but it got us up the hill. However, coming home on one New Year's Eve with wife and 2 sons after midnight, out in the middle of nowhere, before cell phones, the engine seized. It was dark and late and miles from any services, so we sat and waited for someone to drive by. Fortunately, someone showed up after a few minutes and offered to take me to the nearest payphone. My wife didn't want to stay in the car alone, but she really didn't want to get in a car with a stranger, so she stayed with the kids. We made it safely home, towed the Aerostar to a shop, and had the crankshaft and rod main bearings replaced. What happened? A freeze plug in the rear of the block had corroded and drained all the coolant out. We immediately sold the van, bought a Previa, which I don't think are any walk in the park maintenance-wise either, and swore never to own another Ford product. Of the 30 plus cars we've owned over the years, the Aerostar is the only one that left us stranded. I'm tempted to flag this as not constructive because you're not being very constructive to our praise of the Aerostar. So there's always that one story out there, you know. It is funny that the seize plug corroded on a new vehicle. That is strange. You know, but there's always one party pooper in a party, and unfortunately the pooper is you. Now, you know, not taking away from what sounds like a terrible night, and sorry for your experience. However, as you can see, and I'm glad that negative comment's in there because the exception proves the rule, right? And the vast majority of these comments are overwhelmingly positive, from your nostalgia element to your reliability element to your practicality element. I mean, it's all laid out there for you, and maybe we'll just, you know, sort of pass through some of these photos as we sort of wrap up this extended length edition of Year of the Aerostar. And look at some of the beautiful shots here. I wish there was a couple more wide angle shots, but yeah, this does, okay, so this is the dual bench seats. There's no captain's chairs in this one. And we can see the condition of these seats with the patterned inserts. And I'm zoomed in here a little bit. You know, we don't always get to see these wonderful high-res photos. I love metal seat belt buckles. One of my favorite parts about older cars is metal seat belt buckles, and these are so heavy and firm, and just feel so, you know, it's like an airplane seat belt almost. So satisfying when you click that metal buckle into that metal clasp. It's you know, stuff like that too. The tactile experience is what really makes older cars great. As we can see, we do have the great center console here, which is so cool. And even on there, the writing and the arrows, you know, like ergonomically, the Aerostar was just fantastic. Like all the climate controls, so easy and well laid out. I did hear that, I've never seen this up close, but in 97, I believe they actually changed the radio to make the buttons a little different. And sure enough, this is different than my 93. I do miss that it doesn't have the graphic equalizer on it anymore, but, you know, to the point of ergonomics, maybe a little bit easier to operate while you're driving. We can see the beautiful, you know, and obviously very nice and detailed and shiny. All the plastic looks fantastic. Although it's funny because if you look up in this little corner, you can see this foam is creeping over the plastic just a little bit, and that's in the exact same spot my 93 Aerostar is doing that. So just a tiny little bit of fleck of jank in there. You know, that's why jank is great, because the closer you look, the more you realize that nothing is absolutely perfect. And so once you know, it's like the wabi sabi, like I just watched this episode of King of the Hill. Once you embrace the imperfection in things, you realize their true beauty. And, you know, no better example of that than the Aerostar. You know, just a great looking interior, a very comfortable vehicle, a very practical vehicle, a very beautiful vehicle, I would say. So maybe we'll wrap it up there, and we'll get one last beautiful little profile shot of the Aerostar. And my head is probably blocking it in this corner, but you'll just have to run with it. So there you go. That's episode number 100. Hopefully the camera's still running. If not, you'll just see a blank technical difficulties sign. So 48,000 miles, 1997. That is the benchmark for the classic car market on the Ford Aerostar, $7,250. I mean, just incredible value. And maybe I missed that comment. I thought there was a comment that just said insane value, and maybe I passed over it. But oh, there you go, Batman, unbelievable value. Maybe that's you know, how we should sum it up in conclusion. You know, everybody's looking for good value, and you know, when you can get good value and, you know, handsome, dashing looks to boot, then you've got a true winner, and that's what the Aerostar is. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There you go. I'm glad I finally got to this, and it'll probably take me a day to edit by the time you see this. But that's episode number 100. What a milestone for us here on Janky AF, and we just crossed 600 subscribers too, so that's very, very cool. You know, that's not a lot by YouTube standards, but it's a lot for me. And the fact that I've been releasing almost nothing but Aerostar content lately, and my subscribers, you know, while they dip a little bit, but they always go back up. And the fact that there's 600 people, you know, who have at least not unsubscribed from me, who are willing to tolerate all this Aerostar content, that alone is very, very cool to me. So I thank all of you for watching. Hopefully this was like a trip down memory lane for some of you too, and a great celebration of the Ford Aerostar. When I get back in the States, we'll do some more sort of celebratory videos, and maybe I can, you know, release episode 101 or 102 in the meantime while I'm over here. So with that being said, this has been Year of the Aerostar episode number 100. Thank you to anybody who has stuck around this long, you crazy people just like me. And we'll have another one for you very soon. And until then, Janky do thanky. Okay, so obviously the video died on me. I apologize for that, but hopefully you can still hear the audio. Just wanted to, you know, show my face again and sign off and say thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. 100 episodes, and there's much more to come because we have to do at least a minimum of 365, so then it can truly be a year of the Aerostar. And in that spirit, we will have another one very soon. And until then, Janky do thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.